Alright gamers, big spoilers if you haven't played the game. The villain is not quite who it seems to be, so yeah, get out if you don't want any spoilers. It's some big analysis time. We're back with Life is Strange, this time analyzing the main antagonist. Spoilers, it is Mark Jefferson. In Chapter 4, at the very end, he shoots Chloe, drugs Max. In Episode 5, we will learn what really went down with Rachel. Jefferson drugs and kidnaps girls to put into his darkroom photography sessions as he is obsessed with the idea of innocence and artistic potential. He had a hand in Rachel's death as he's quote-unquote mentoring Nathan in using his family's fortune. He was the one who drugged Kate, plans to photograph Max and kill her. David intervenes and saves Max. The sacrifice Chloe ending ends up with him getting arrested, and sacrificing the Bay leads his fate up to interpretation. Now, when all my hours and research sunk into the game, I have found some polarizing opinions on this guy. Obviously, no one likes him on a personal level, but there was some substantial criticism on his writing as a villain. Some opinions were him being two-dimensional, his more disturbing rather than a deep and complex character, is not very realistic. Opinions were divided. Plenty of people think he's also written really well, some people don't. I'm a part of the group that thinks he's written really well, and I've got some reasons why I think that. So here we have the Jefferson villain analysis. Now, first off is how his motivations are written. Mr. Jefferson's motivations for why he does what he does are not only unique but done in good taste as well. His intentions are purely artistic and take a concept that can be taken sexually but doesn't always have to. It's relatively clear that what he does is more or less a stand-in for sexual assault and such, which is not only quite cliche, but not exactly as in-depth and not always taken in the best way. He does this for artistic purposes, and losing innocence doesn't just mean sex. While it can mean that for sure, it can also be the moment innocence turns into despair or depravity and such in the way he does it. In short, taking that common sexual creep trope and turning it into something deeper that connects with the game's themes of photography and is pretty much a play on this common trope, but done better, I feel is really good writing. Next up is how grounded in realism I feel his character is. I've seen criticisms based around the fact that what he does isn't generally realistic, and while that is true, I think it fits in with the idea that the basic narrative in the game is grounded in reality. While of course there are supernatural elements, they simply advance the plot. The main narrative stays the same. You also see this with Don't Nod's other game, Tell Me Why. While there are supernatural elements, the main narrative is still the same without it. It makes sense that he can be a villain given we find out that he is a psychopath, and this makes it all the more realistic. Jefferson is the textbook example of a psychopath. Lack of empathy, lack of conscience, and sees people as tools or a means to a goal. And he has two distinct personalities. He has his cool, hip professor persona that he uses to blend in with the normal everyday people to get what he wants. In the darkroom, we see his photographer persona come out, where he's very meticulous, short-tempered, cold, and calculated. There are also plenty of hints that he's in the villain in previous interactions. The obvious lecture on putting you in the corner and capturing the moment you lose your innocence is a clear one. There are more interactions like this, however. Plenty of conversations with him take on much more meaning when you realize his intentions after beating the game. It gives off a much more creepy vibe when you know his intentions with Max and how they interact. Also, finding a student file on Max when you go with Chloe into the school after hours, there's complaints on that she's nosy. Jefferson calls her nosy in the darkroom, implicating that he's the one complaining about her nosiness and is aware that she is on his trail. All of this relates to real-life psychopaths. They can blend in seamlessly into society, essentially putting on a mask to live in everyday life. Famous people and people in power are more likely to be psychopaths, as it's easier to step on people and see them as tools more than anything. This also correlates really well when you find out when someone is a psychopath. Most of them aren't discovered until they do something that proves it, like with serial killers. No one notices the telltale signs beforehand, just like in the game. Also, like with most other well-written characters, his actions and choices are flawed. While yes, he's very morally flawed, he's also narratively flawed, which is good and all leans on his relationship with Nathan. He sees a troubled, mentally ill teenager with no father figure who has loads of money and takes his opportunity to fulfill his messed up dream of this photography. And he also takes him on as a protege. This is what leads to his downfall. He probably intended to kill Nathan and move on, but Nathan being that unstable throws a wrench in this process. He kills Chloe as if Rachel wasn't enough, and once he shoots Chloe, we go down the whole rabbit hole of the main story. Jefferson creates a rock and a hard place with Nathan. He couldn't off him too soon or he loses his bunker and his perfect photography place. And if he actually tries helping Nathan, I would assume it won't work given one is a psychopath and one's a desperate mentally ill teenager. This whole plan was doomed to fail from the start involving Nathan. And lastly, I feel that his impact on the player after beating the game is very substantial and well written. Playing the game after beating it once adds a lot more when you actually know what happens, and it makes subsequent playthroughs more impactful and adds emotion towards the character. Seeing Jefferson pre-Max kidnapping and how he interacts and what he says is brought into a new light. It adds replayability to a narrative game, which is very rare. Most types of games like this aren't very replayable because you know what's going to happen. Every time I see Jefferson when I'm recording gameplay or something, I just feel disgusted and angry towards him. I'm always thinking like, dude, I don't like you, don't talk to me, don't take me to a dark room and take pictures of me. This forever affects how you play and perceive the game. Anyone who's beaten the game or knows of the full story won't be able to look at him the same way again. And plenty of people like me have been fooled by his initial character, which furthers the concept of Max not necessarily being a separate character, but rather what you would do if you were Max. In conclusion, Mark Jefferson is a very well-written antagonist. He's very realistic in parallels to real-life psychopaths and serial killers. He's motivated in a unique way that undermines a common trope and brings it in a better light. He demonstrates flaws that add to the realism and humanize his negative traits, and he creates a lasting impact and perception on him, especially on further playthroughs. So in conclusion, fuck Jefferson, all my homies hate Jefferson. Well, that wraps it up, gamers. We got more big brain analysis to come. Let me know what you think on this guy. Is he, you like him? Because I don't, but, to each their own. I will see you gamers next time.